Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. On today's tutorial we're going to make these really creepy skeleton statues for your D&D games, Warhammer or Frostgrave. Right, yeah, so to start off with, we're going to need some supplies from the craft store, like these columns and some wood discs. My buddy James got me these from the makerspace. He looted them from the trash, which I'm going to add to the base of the columns. You don't need these, but I think they make a nice little touch. I've used them in a couple craft projects before. We'll also need some wood circles, and I use the fancy wood discs as well. Once again, I'm using hot glue, but if you'd like to use a wood glue and wait 24 hours for it to dry, feel free. You can also look at gluethistothat.com for some advice. Basically, it's pretty simple. Just glue the column to the wood disc, glue another wood disc, glue on the base, and add a skull, and you have got a column that is good to go and ready to paint. For the top part, I used a different wood disc, the less expensive, more value-minded discs, and I put those on the top as a base for the skull. It's not a necessary thing to do, but I thought it would just add a nice little more variation to the shape of the column and give a more interesting look. Next, I make sure the hot glue is really piping hot and melt that onto the plastic skull and then plop that right on top of my column. And lastly, I put the column on top of this wood base. Now, if you don't have these round discs, these little throwaways from the makerspace, then you can do without. I just thought it would add a little more height and interest to the columns. Also, keep them a little more weighted down at the bottom. These things come with some flash marks, so what I like to do here is file them down, and then it smooths it off. And the next step is to go ahead and prime everything with a decent primer. For this look, I decided to go with some of the stone texture paints from Cryoland. Rust-Oleum has some really good quality ones too. And I wanted to get more of a stone look. It's kind of a cheat way to go, but I thought I would just go ahead and do it anyway. And I had forgotten how weird these paints are to work with. You really do require 2 light spray coats, and let the first one dry first. Here are the columns after letting everything dry. You can see some spots where the paint missed. That's because I've forgotten how weird this stuff is to work with. But I do like the way it ends up. Adds a nice little texture to your piece, some physical texture, which is good for dry brushing. The next step is to go ahead and get some dry brush highlights on here. Now, I don't really go super light with my dry brush on this round of highlights. And then after that, we're going to wash and then do some more highlights as well. So kick back and enjoy. For this, I'm not really going too light on the paint, and I'm using a tougher brush. The bristles aren't very soft. It's more of a harder bristle brush for the detail on this. Now I am going to add another layer of wash. These just turned out to be too light after doing all this dry brushing, so I added some wash to it, and then I did another highlight on top.